Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles. It all started one May afternoon, 26 years ago. Funny how some days cling to you like oil on skin. How you can smell them, feel them like they're still happening. I remember that Thursday, clear as crystal. The air was warm, thick with the scent of cut grass and the far-off smoke of barbecue grills, but all I could smell was gasoline and metal. Always gasoline and metal. It clung to my shirt, soaked into the creases of my jeans, and had permanently set up shop under my nails. No matter how hard I scrubbed, my hands were rough, cracked in places where the skin just gave up trying to stay whole. Wrenches, grease, heat. They were part of my life back then. Pardon me. But even with the aches in my knuckles and the sweat cooling on my back, I felt a strange lightness that day. In my pocket, folded in half and still warm from. The office printer was the last paycheck I needed, the last piece. I kept patting my chest like I was making sure my heart was still beating, but really, I was just checking for the envelope. Every few steps, I couldn't help myself. That paycheck meant more than just money. It meant that I could finally walk into Reyes Jewelers on 5th and lay down the full payment for the ring. The ring, a round-cut sapphire in a white gold setting, just like Patricia always said she loved. Not too flashy, simple, elegant, beautiful, just like her. I'd stared at it in the display case more times than I could count, always pretending I was just browsing. The clerk eventually stopped asking if I needed help. He just nodded when I came in. I was going to propose next month, June, her birthday. She always said she loved surprises, but I was terrible at keeping secrets. That's why only one person knew. James. James, my older brother, my best friend, my shadow, and my mirror all at once. We still lived at home then, in our parents' small two-bedroom house. He had the corner room with the window facing the neighbors, plum tree. And I had the one above the garage. James was the brains. He'd always been the golden child in school. Aced every test. Read thick books for fun. Fixed computers like it was nothing. I was better with things I could touch. Engines, bolts, machines that talked through rattles and leaks. James always said I had mechanic hands. Strong, precise, honest. That afternoon when I got home and found him in the kitchen scribbling something in his ever-present notebook, I didn't even wait. I slapped the paycheck on the table and said, "That's it. I'm buying the ring tomorrow." James looked up and grinned. "So it's really happening, huh?" I nodded. Probably too fast, like a kid with a secret. Next month, her birthday. I'm going to ask her at the lake under that big oak tree she loves. You think she'll say yes? He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Are you kidding me? Patricia's crazy about you. You're going to make that girl happy, brother. There was something about the way he said it, not just pride, there was warmth. Like he really believed in me. I needed that. Coming from James, it meant everything. I left the kitchen smiling like a fool, the kind of grin you wear when you think the world's finally tilting in your favor. Patricia and I had been together for 3 years by then. She had that kind of beauty that crept up on you, black hair that cascaded down to her waist, honey-colored eyes that caught the sun in the late afternoons, and a laugh that could peel the sadness off a person like paint from old wood. Being with her felt like breathing, like everything else, faded into white noise when she was near. We used to take walks in the park after dinner, holding hands and talking about her someday. A house with a big garden, I'd say. A tire swing, she'd reply. And sunflowers taller than me. Sure, I'd grin. In a porch where we can drink coffee and yell at teenagers walking on the lawn. Only if you get gray and grumpy, she'd tease. Oh, I will. I'm halfway there. We dreamed in those walks. Dreamed big. And that May afternoon, as the sun dipped just low enough to make the sky blush, I decided to surprise her. My boss let me leave early that day, said it was a little thank you for all the overtime I'd racked up during the week. Go home, kid, he told me, slapping me on the back with that grease-stained glove of his. Enjoy the sun while it lasts. I Remember grinning like a fool as I cleaned up, changed into a clean shirt in the locker room, and checked my pocket for that paycheck again. It was still there, of course, but I kept touching it like it might disappear. On the way out, I stopped by the flower stand near the gas station, the one with the old lady who always remembered my name. "Sunflowers today?" she asked before I even opened my mouth. I nodded. "The brightest ones you got?" Patricia loved sunflowers, said they reminded her of warm days, of late summer fields, of simplicity and joy. She used to press one between the pages of her sketchbook when she felt sad. "They're like little suns," she'd whisper. Who wouldn't feel better looking at a little sun? So, I bought a whole bunch wrapped in brown paper, stems poking out. I held them in one hand like I was carrying a treasure. The drive to her place felt longer than usual. Even though the streets were familiar, the windows were down, the wind in my face, and I thought about the look on her face when she opened the door. Maybe we'd sit out on her porch, sip lemonade, talk about what she wanted to do for her birthday. I had a key. She'd given it to me almost a year ago, pressing it into my hand with a kiss and a soft, "Your family now." Her parents adored me. I helped her dad build shelves in the garage last Christmas. Her mom always packed me extra containers of food when I left. Thursdays, both of them worked late. I knew that rhythm well. The house was still quiet. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the scent of her perfume lingering faintly in the hall. I smiled to myself. Maybe she was painting. Maybe she had headphones in, dancing around in her socks like she sometimes did when she thought no one was watching. Then I heard it. Laughter, soft, muffled from down the hall from her room. I moved toward the sound slowly. The sunflowers were still in my hand, crinkling slightly with every step I took. I didn't think anything of it at first. Maybe she was on a call. Maybe she had a friend over, but as I reached her door, I saw it was cracked open, just barely. And what I saw when I peeked inside, God, it was like the air got sucked out of my lungs. Patricia was sitting on the bed, her legs tucked up, wearing only a t-shirt. My t-shirt, the navy blue one with the tiny white paint stained near the collar, the one I gave her on our second anniversary because she always said it smelled like me. She was smiling, laughing next to her, shirtless. His hand resting casually on her thigh was James. My brother. My blood. Time didn't slow down. It stopped. Froze. Every thought, every feeling backed up in my head like traffic in a storm. The bouquet slipped from my hand. I didn't even feel it fall. Just heard the soft thud as the stems hit the wood floor, petals scattering. That sound that broke the spell. Patricia gasped, yanking a sheet around herself like it mattered, like she could undo what I saw. "David, it's not what you think." James stood up fast, already holding his hands out, eyes wide with panic. "Brother, let me explain, please. It wasn't. It's not." "Don't," I said. Or maybe I didn't. I'm not sure if it came out of my mouth or just screamed inside my skull. "It's not what you think." That phrase again, as if I'd walked in blind, as if there was some twist to explain the way his hand had just been sliding off her skin. As if there was another reason my girlfriend was wrapped in my shirt in her bed next to my brother like they'd done it 100 times. I looked at them, both at her pale face, red with shame or fear. At him, still trying to cover himself with words. "How long?" I croaked, my voice cracked like dry wood. "How long?" No answer. My fists clenched. They looked at each other before answering. That single, quiet glance between them hit me harder than any words. It was brief, barely a second, but enough. Enough to tell me that this wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a single night of confusion. This was something they'd built together in shadows while I was out working double shifts, saving for a future that clearly only I believed in. 3 months, James finally muttered. His voice barely carried. He couldn't even look at me. Coward. 3 months. 3 months. I felt something twist inside me, deep and ugly. My jaw tightened. My nails dug into my palms. But we didn't want to. "Hurt you," Patricia said, her voice trembling like she was the victim. It just happened." It just happened. Like they tripped and fell into each other's arms. Like betrayal was something that occurred out of nowhere. Like a damn thunderstorm, an accident, a force of nature they had no control over. I exploded. I don't even remember the first thing I threw. A lamp. Maybe a picture frame. Something fragile. Something that felt like it deserved to shatter the way I had just shattered. "You didn't want to hurt me?" I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of fury. "You didn't want to hurt me, but you did this." I pointed between them, accusing Wild. 3 months while I was out there breaking my back. "James, you knew. You knew everything. I told you I was going to marry her." James tried to speak again, but I cut him off. Don't you dare open your mouth." I turned to Patricia, still wrapped in that sheet like it made her any less bare to me. "I was saving to buy you a ring." I yelled, my voice now a raw wound. "A ring. And you?" I couldn't even finish. All the memories came flooding back. The walks in the park, the plans, the quiet nights where she laid on my chest and asked me if I thought our kids would have her eyes or mine. The lies, all of it, poison. Now! I stormed out. I don't remember driving. I just remember the shaking. My hands trembled on the wheel, my chest hurt. I had to pull over eventually because I couldn't see the road through the blur of my tears. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, sobbing like a man who had just lost something he'd never get back. That night, I called my mother. I needed something. Comfort, rage, solidarity. I don't even know what I was hoping for. "Son," she said, gently like she was soothing a child who scraped his knee. "Brothers always fight." I sat there in stunned silence. She continued, "I'm sure it's not as bad as it seems." Not as bad as it seems. I hung up without another word. I stared at the dark ceiling of my room, that room I still shared with James, knowing he might come back any second. I couldn't bear it. The very thought made my skin crawl. I packed a bag that night, tossed in the essentials just enough to leave. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. I found a small apartment above a convenience store near the mechanic shop. It was nothing special. Cheap floors, a shower that hissed and groaned when you turned it on, but it was mine. More importantly, it wasn't his. I changed my phone number. I cut them all out. My mother tried to reach out. My father said little, only murmured the same tired phrase, "Time heals all wounds, but some wounds don't close. Some fester." My aunts kept inviting James to family dinners, birthdays, christenings, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't gutted me. I made one thing clear to all of them. If James was there, I would not be. 2 months passed. I was slowly starting to feel like I could breathe again. Then one night, I got a message from my cousin Laura. Just one line. "Patricia's pregnant with James's baby." I sat on the floor of my apartment for hours that night. No music, no TV, just silence and the sound of the neighbor's dog barking in the distance. 6 months after that, they got married. I didn't get an invitation. Of course I didn't, but my family did. My mother called me the morning after their wedding. "We had a beautiful ceremony," she said softly, almost cautiously, as if she knew how brittle my voice had become. "I really think it was the right thing to do to support your brother at such an important time in his life." I didn't say anything. I just ended the call. I didn't speak to her for 3 weeks after that. Life didn't stop for my grief. The world kept moving. Bills still came. The sun still rose and the ache inside me settled like old rust, something I learned to live with, even as it corroded parts of who I used to be. It was a friend, Felix, ever the optimist who dragged me to that dance class. "Come on, man. You look like your soul's been evicted. Move your feet a little." I didn't want to go. I hated dancing. I hated people. But that's where I met her, Barbara. She was in scrubs, hair tied back, laughing with a group of women by the mirror wall. She had a warm smile, the kind that didn't force itself on you, but invited you to rest in it. She was confident, direct, and completely unfazed by my clip responses and weary silences. She wasn't Patricia. She didn't try to be. Maybe that's why I fell so hard so fast. We got married a year later on a cloudy afternoon with a handful of close friends. Nothing elaborate. I didn't want elaborate. I wanted real. 9 months later, our daughter was born, Jessica. From the first time I held her, everything changed, her tiny hand gripping my pinky finger. God, I never knew I could love someone like that. She became the light in all the dark corners of my life. She gave me something to protect, something to live for that wasn't just about surviving heartbreak. But even as joy settled into the cracks, the wound never truly closed. I never spoke to James or Patricia again. On the rare occasions we found ourselves in the same space. A funeral, a distant cousin's wedding, I kept to the opposite end of the room, cold, unmoving, a silent boundary they never dared cross. My family learned to work around it. They knew where my red line was drawn. If they wanted me in their life, they had to accept it. I wouldn't break bread at the same table. I wouldn't exchange fake smiles. That door, as far as I was concerned, was sealed shut. Barbara tried now and then. "Maybe one day you'll forgive," she'd say, touching my arm gently. "For your own peace, David." But there are betrayals that don't fade. They don't shrink with time. They harden. They imprint themselves into your spine, your chest, your breath. Forgiveness didn't feel like peace to me. It felt like surrender, like saying it hadn't mattered. Even when Barbara and I divorced a decade later, for reasons far removed from the past, we simply unraveled slowly, like a thread left dangling. I never reopened that door, not once. And then a few weeks ago, everything shifted again. It was a quiet Sunday like any other. Jessica and I had a ritual. We met at a little cafe near her apartment every week, just the two of us, a father and daughter tradition built over cappuccinos, croissants, and soft conversation. She sat across from me, stirring her drink, then looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. There was something careful in her gaze, something almost rehearsed. "Dad," she said, setting her spoon down with a faint clink. "I want to meet them." I blinked. "Meet who?" She hesitated for a second, then firmly my Uncle James and Patricia. My hand froze, the coffee cup hovering midair. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for the smirk, the half grin that said, "Just kidding. Dad, don't look so horrified," but there was none. "What are you talking about?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt like sandpaper and my heartbeat drowned out the chatter in the cafe. Jessica sighed, folding her hands neatly on the table as if she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. "I've been following them on social media for years," she said quietly. "Melissa and I started talking when I was in college." I blinked. "Melissa?" My voice was low, disbelieving. "You mean James and Patricia's daughter?" She nodded. "The girl born from betrayal. The girl whose very existence had once felt like the cruel exclamation point at the end of the worst chapter of my life." "How did you even get their contact?" I asked, doing everything I could to stay composed. "Grandma showed me pictures of her when I was 15, she said, meeting my eyes. I was curious. I looked her up on Facebook. We started talking a little, then more over time. She's actually really nice, Dad." My jaw clenched. Of course, my mother, even though she'd claimed to respect my decision to cut ties, she had always found ways to keep Jessica aware of that side of the family. Her favorite line, "Children are not to blame." And maybe that was true. Maybe it is true. But it didn't make it any easier to hear. Especially not now. Not like this. "This has nothing to do with your wedding, right?" I asked, suddenly wary. My tone had shifted. Sharper now, less fatherly, more defensive. "You're not saying this," because Jessica looked down at her hands, confirming every fear that had just begun to sprout. "I want them to come," she said softly. "To the wedding. My Uncle James, Patricia, and my cousins. I want the whole family to be there." The words crashed into me like a sudden wave, cold and unrelenting. My stomach twisted. A chill ran up my spine. 26 years. 26 years of silence, of distance, of holding the line that kept me from the people who had shattered me. And now my own daughter, my light, my reason, was asking me to cross it. "You can't ask me that," I said. I tried to keep my voice, calm, but it trembled at the edges. You can't." The table between us suddenly felt miles wide. The cafe, once a warm place filled with Sunday comfort, blurred around me. A whirlwind of emotions tore through me. Grief, confusion, fear, fury, sadness, love for her, and a deep, buried pain I thought I had sealed away for good. But there it was again, alive, demanding to be felt. "Do you know what they did to me?" I asked, my voice barely controlled, my hands curling into fists under the table. "Dad, it was 26 years ago," Jessica burst out, her voice rising sharply. A few heads turned in our direction. "Don't you think it's time to get over the past?" Get over the past? As if it were that simple. As if healing came with an expiration date? She didn't know. Couldn't know what it felt like to walk in on your brother and the woman you were saving to propose to? To see them exchange that look, one that had once belonged only to you. To remember every night James had listened to me ramble about Patricia, about how I was going to ask her to marry me, how I had found the one. The way she laughed at my jokes, the way she kissed my forehead when I was tired. I had trusted them both with my heart, and they had crushed it without blinking. "You don't understand what you're asking me," I said, trying, failing not to let the anger color my tone. "It's not that simple." "And what about what I'm asking you?" Jessica fired back, her voice unsteady, eyes shining with a mix of hurt and frustration. "It's my wedding, Dad, the most important day of my life, and I want my whole family to be there. They are not your family." I snapped and immediately regretted it. Her face froze, her mouth opened slightly, and for a second I saw the little girl, who used to cry when I clipped her wings during our pretend butterfly games. "They haven't been present in your life because you didn't allow it," she said, her voice rising, slapping her hand down on the table. The plates rattled. The man behind us stopped mid-sip of his cappuccino. "Do you know how many birthdays? How many Christmases? How many summers the first miss sharing with my cousins because of your pride?" Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Pride. That's what it looked like to her. Not protection, not survival. Not the only way I could crawl out of the abyss they threw me into. Just pride. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. My hands were trembling, whether from rage or heartbreak. I didn't know. "If you want to invite them, do it," I said, cold, sharp, trying to protect what little control I had left. "But don't expect me to be there if they go." Her expression crumpled into disbelief, like I just slapped her across the face. "Are you telling me you wouldn't attend your own daughter's wedding because of a fight you had when you were 20? She asked, her voice cracking. "It wasn't a fight, Jessica," I said through clenched teeth. "It was betrayal by the two people I trusted most in the world." "And what about trusting me?" she shot back, tears beginning to rim her lashes. "What about what I want?" We stared at each other. No words, just the low hum of conversations around us. The clink of mugs on saucers and the ache of everything left unsaid. For several seconds I could see it in her eyes. That fire, that sheer stubbornness, I knew it all too well. She had inherited it straight from me. "I don't just want them to come," Jessica said, her voice lower now, more measured, but no less firm. "I want Melissa to be one of my bridesmaids." It felt like a slap. Melissa, the daughter of James and Patricia, the living proof of their betrayal. That was it, the last straw. It was one thing to grit my teeth and let them be present in the shadows of the day, sit quietly in the last row, invisible. I might have tolerated that, but for the daughter of them to stand beside mine at the altar? No. "If that's what you want," I said, forcing my voice to stay even, though something inside me cracked, "then you'll have to do it without my support." She blinked. "What?" I will not pay for a wedding that celebrates what destroyed me." Her face turned pale. I saw her doing the math. We had talked so many times over coffee after Sunday lunches about budgets, venues, flowers, photographers. I had promised to take care of most of it. It had been a point of pride for me, something I wanted to do for her, even if it meant extra shifts at the shop or delaying that long, overdue vacation. "Are you blackmailing me?" she asked, stunned. "No," I said, trying not to flinch at her tone. "I'm setting my boundaries. This is your choice." She stood up abruptly, scraping the chair back hard against the tile. She grabbed her purse, slinging it over her shoulder, her eyes still locked on mine. Only now they were colder than I had ever seen. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp with pain and fury. "If that's what you want, I'll do it without you. I don't need you." Then she walked out of the cafe, heels clacking on the floor, back straight like she was trying not to fall apart. I sat there stunned, watching the door swing, closed behind her. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't know whether to slam my fist into the table or run after her and beg her not to hate me. But I didn't move. I just sat frozen. Had I done the right thing, or had I just let the past reach out and take one more thing from me? Something I could never get back. The next few days were hell. I called her again and again, straight to voicemail. I texted short, simple things. "Can we talk? I miss you. Please." Nothing. Then Barbara called, furious. "How could you do this to your daughter?" she demanded before I could even say hello. "Do you know how much she's cried?" "Barbara, she won't even talk to me. She said she's heartbroken. She feels like she's lost you, David." "And for what?" "She's the one forcing me," I said, trying not to sound defensive, though I could hear it in my own voice. "I'm not the one bringing them into this." "She is." "For God's sake, David," Barbara snapped. "It's been over 2 decades. Don't you think it's time to grow up?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because somewhere deep inside I wasn't sure if she was right, and that was just the beginning. It was like word had spread overnight. Suddenly my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My mother called twice in one evening, leaving long voicemails about family and forgiveness. My cousin Teresa sent a message. "This isn't like you, David. Talk to Jessica." Even my father, who usually stayed clear of all family drama, called me out of the blue. "Son," he said with a sigh, "I don't say this often, but you're being ridiculous. A man must be able to forgive," my father said, his voice deep and steady over the phone, the way it always was when he was about to deliver one of his final-sounding truths, especially when it comes to his daughter's happiness. I didn't respond. I just stared at the wall. The only one who didn't make me feel like I was losing my mind was Clara. We'd been together for 3 years, each keeping our own place because we liked it that way. She was a literature teacher, soft-spoken, observant, but with a backbone of iron when it mattered. Sensitive but practical, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke and said only what needed to be said. We were at my place, sitting at the little kitchen table, eating her homemade lentil stew when I finally let it all out. The fight with Jessica, the guilt gnawing at me, the silent sense. Clara stirred her spoon slowly before speaking. "Everyone tells you what you should feel," she said, not looking at me, just gently blowing on her spoon. "But no one can dictate your emotions. Only you know how deep that pain was." Her words didn't solve anything, but they helped. They gave me space to breathe. Still, it felt like I was losing Jessica, and that ache never eased. 2 weeks passed. Nothing from her, just silence. I gave in and called Miguel, her fiancé. He'd always been polite. Decent kid, soft eyes, good posture, the kind of man I once hoped she'd find. "Jessica's really hurt," he said gently. "But she's moving forward with the wedding. Her friends are helping her out. Barbara, too." The idea of my daughter having to borrow money for her wedding after I'd promised to support her cut into me like a blade. But every time I even thought about backing down, I saw it. Them. James, my own brother, with Patricia, her shirt half off, his hands on her back, and I was back in my 20s, gutted, betrayed, alone. I couldn't make that image go away, no matter how hard I tried. Then one afternoon, I pulled into the driveway after work and saw her car parked out front. My heart jumped. I didn't know what I felt. Hope, fear, both. I walked inside quickly, sweaty from the heat, my shirt sticking to my back. The moment I opened the door, I stopped in my tracks. They were all there. Jessica, James, Patricia sitting in my living room. I froze, feeling like the floor had disappeared from under me. James looked older, his once black hair now almost completely gray. He stood awkwardly as I entered. Patricia still had that polished beauty, the kind that made my stomach twist with a complicated shame. "What is this?" I said, my voice low and already shaking with anger. My keys trembled in my hand. "Dad, please," Jessica said, standing up. Just listen to them. They've come to talk to you." James stepped forward like a man stepping into his own execution. "David," he said softly, "I know I have no right to be here." "No, you don't," I snapped, pointing to the door. "Get out now." "Dad, please." Jessica's voice cracked. She looked desperate. She looked like her again, my little girl. But I was already past the point of calm. "I can't believe you did this," I muttered, stepping further into the room, feeling my hands ball into fists. "An ambush in my own house." "It's not an ambush," Patricia said, rising from the couch, her voice composed, practiced. "We just want to fix things. For Jessica, for the family." "Family," I repeated, the word like it was poison on my tongue. "You destroyed that a long time ago." The air in the room grew thick, too thick to breathe. The walls felt closer. No one moved. Not even Clara's cat, perched silently on the window ledge. The atmosphere became so tense you could almost cut it with a knife. James opened his mouth, again, trying to say something. Maybe a plea, maybe an excuse, but I raised my hand, cutting him off like a blade through rope. "You have exactly 1 minute to get out of my house," I said, my voice sharp, hollow, foreign even to my own ears. Before I call the police, the silence that followed was total. I could hear the ticking of the old clock in the kitchen, loud and slow, like a countdown. "You're impossible," Jessica cried suddenly, the words bursting from her like shrapnel. Her face was flushed, her voice breaking. "You only think about yourself, your pain, your pride." Her tears came fast, hot and furious. I hadn't seen her cry like that since she was 12 and broke her wrist on the monkey bars. Patricia, still composed in that infuriating, practiced way, touched James's arm and guided him gently toward the door. He hesitated, glancing back at me. For a second, his face softened. There was something in his eyes. Was it regret? Pity? "I'm sorry, brother," he murmured. The word made my stomach twist. Brother, as if that still meant anything. "We never wanted things to be this way," he said softly. But they were. They were. Then they were gone. Jessica stood in the middle of the room, her body trembling, her hands clenched at her sides like she was trying not to shatter. "You just ruined everything," she said, her voice quieter now, but soaked in rage. "All this time, I thought you were the victim. But now I see you're just a bitter man who can't let go of the past." Her words hit me harder than anything James or Patricia could have said because I could hear it, the truth she believed and the distance it carved between us. "You've already made your decision," I said, my voice tight, my throat burning. "I hope you're happy with it." "I will be," she spat, her eyes blazing. "They'll be at my wedding." "And you?" "That depends on you." She turned. The door slammed behind her with a finality that echoed through the walls, through my ribs, into my gut, and then there was only silence. I stood there rooted, the fury drained from me. My legs shook, my chest hurt like someone had sat on it. I turned slowly and collapsed onto the couch. Their couch now, it felt like James had sat right here, Patricia, next to him, and now I was sinking into the hollow they left behind, into something colder than just furniture. What had I just done? Was I really willing to lose my daughter forever because I refused to face the ghosts I'd buried so long ago? The question wouldn't let me go. It clawed at my thoughts, rewinding the moment again and again. I tossed and turned all night, the sheets tangled around my legs, my mind playing the scene on a loop. Unable to sleep, I spent the next few days like a ghost wearing my own skin. I moved through the hours without living them. Went to the shop, turned wrenches, checked oil, replaced brake pads. I barely spoke, barely ate. The guys noticed, but no one dared say anything. They just gave me space like they were walking around a crater. Even Clara, who came by after work with her gentle hands and her quiet strength, couldn't get through. To me, we'd sit together on the couch, the TV flickering with some forgettable show neither of us cared about, and I'd just stare at the screen. "How are you really?" she asked me one evening, her voice soft, her eyes scanning my face. I didn't answer right away because what could I say? That every memory I tried to bury had clawed its way out, that my daughter's tears were now etched into every corner of the house, that the sight of James and Patricia sitting on my couch made me feel like a stranger in my own life. "I don't know how to explain it," I finally said. "I feel like I'm walking a tightrope between two cliffs, the past I can't forget and the future I might lose." She reached for my hand. "Have you considered that maybe Jessica needs this?" I looked at her. "Needs what? The people who tore everything apart." "Not to hurt you," Clara said gently, "but to feel whole. You built your life around that absence. Clean break, no contact. But Jessica, she grew up with questions, with holes, with whispers and half-stories and hidden photographs your mother showed her behind your back." That stung, I'd suspected, but hearing it aloud made the blood rush to my ears. "She's trying to make sense of the pieces," Clara continued. "Maybe this reunion for her isn't about betrayal. It's about completion." Her words settled over me like a weight, but not a suffocating one. More like something grounding, something that made me think. Maybe Jessica wasn't choosing them over me. Maybe she was trying to stitch a torn fabric I had long thrown away. "I'm going to give in," I said quietly for her. "I can't lose her over this." Clara squeezed my hand. "That's brave." That night after she left, I sat alone in the kitchen. The house was too quiet. I stared at my phone for a long time, rehearsed what I would say. "Jessica, I'm sorry. I don't like it, but I'll accept it. If you so desperately want James and Patricia at your wedding, I'll be there too because I love you more than I hate them." I even convinced myself I could watch Melissa, Patricia's daughter, walk down the aisle as a bridesmaid without my stomach turning. My thumb hovered over the call button, but just as I was about to press it, the screen lit up. Joshua, an old friend, one of the few people who knew everything from the start. He used to work with my father before he retired. We hadn't spoken in months. I answered. "Joshua, David," he said, voice cautious. "I know it's none of my business, but I think you should know something about James." My grip on the phone tightened. "What are you talking about?" "I ran into your cousin Stephen a few days ago," he said. "He told me James only wants to reconcile with you now because his son Timothy is getting married too." I didn't say anything. My chest went tight. Joshua continued. "Apparently, a lot of family members are planning not to attend Timothy's wedding because of what James did to you years ago." I froze. "What are you saying?" "James needs to clean up his image," Joshua replied, his voice low, almost apologetic. "He needs you to publicly forgive him so his own event doesn't fall apart." I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding in my ears. I could barely hear him over it. Stephen overheard him arguing with Patricia. He continued, "Apparently," James said, and I quote, "If David forgives me at Jessica's wedding, no one will dare miss Timothy's." It hit me like a train. All the looks, the awkward pauses, James's half apology, the cryptic, "We never wanted things to be this way." They weren't about healing. They weren't about guilt or family or regret. They were about convenience, about optics. I managed to whisper, "Are you sure?" "I wouldn't be calling you if I wasn't," Joshua said. Stephen was sitting at the next table. He heard every word. I thanked him mechanically and hung up. Then, I just sat there at the kitchen table in the dark, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. At first there was rage, hot, pulsing, overwhelming. But then it receded, and what replaced it was something worse. Clarity, a bone-deep stillness, like the final hollow breath of someone who has nothing left to scream. It wasn't about my inability to forgive. It wasn't about stubborn pride. It was about being used again, like I had been all those years ago. Without hesitation, I picked up my phone and typed, "I need to talk to you. It's important." I stared at the message for a second, then hit send. To my surprise, she replied almost instantly, "Tomorrow at the cafe, 10 a.m." I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, going over it again and again. What I would say, how I could tell her the truth without making it sound like I was twisting things to my advantage. I didn't want to hurt her any more than she already was, but I couldn't stay silent either. Not now. I thought about the wedding, about James sitting there in a neat suit pretending to be the repentant older brother, while his real motive slithered beneath the surface, about Patricia playing hostess, about Melissa tossing flowers and Timothy soaking in the applause with my forgiveness stamped on it like a seal of approval. No. When morning finally came, I dressed carefully, shaved, combed my hair. I wanted to look like someone Jessica could believe in, someone who wasn't broken. The cafe was quiet when I arrived. The air smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, and sunlight filtered softly through the windows. I chose a table by the window where we used to sit sometimes when she was little. After ballet practice, after her piano recital, before everything cracked, she walked in right on time. Her face looked pale, tired. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her usual spark, that infectious energy that could light up a room, was gone. Guilt stabbed at me. I was part of that weariness. I'd added weight to her shoulders when she was already carrying more than she should have. "Thanks for coming," I said as she slid into the seat across from me. Her coffee was already waiting. She looked me dead in the eye. "What did you want to talk about?" Straight to the point. Just like her mother. I took a breath and leaned forward, wrapping my hands around my cup like it might anchor me. "Last night I got a call from Joshua. Remember him? Your grandfather's friend?" She nodded. "He told me something I think you should know before making any decisions about your wedding." I began choosing my words carefully. I didn't want to come off as bitter or vindictive. I wanted her to see this for what it was. As calmly as I could, I told her everything. The call from Joshua, what Stephen overheard, James's plans for Timothy's wedding, and how we were just pawns in that equation. As I spoke, I watched her face change. First a flicker of disbelief, then surprise, then something that twisted my gut. Indignation, not at me, at them. "Are you sure?" she asked. It was the same question I had asked Joshua, and hearing her say it filled me with a quiet ache. "Joshua has no reason to lie," I said gently. "He's not involved in any of this, and honestly, it all fits. Why else would James reach out now after 26 years? Why suddenly make peace days before your wedding?" She didn't say anything. She just stared at the table, biting her lip like she used to when she was nervous before a school performance. Then, wordlessly, she took out her phone and began typing. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm messaging Melissa," she said, not looking up. "I want to know if it's true." So, we waited. The cafe around us moved on as if nothing had changed. Cups clinked. Baristas called out orders. Our coffee sat untouched, slowly going cold. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. She opened the message. I saw her eyes skim the screen and then slowly fill with tears. She blinked fast, her lips trembling. "It's true," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Melissa says Timothy is getting married. In December, and yes, there are problems. A lot of people in the family aren't planning to attend because of what happened with you. She said her father has been trying to clear the way. Clear the way. God. The phrase stung like bulldozing. Everything in his path, even her. I reached across the table and gently took her hand in mine. For the first time in weeks, she didn't pull away. Her hand felt small and mine. Fragile. She was still my little girl in that moment, despite everything. "I'm sorry, honey," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "I know how much he wanted us all to be together. I know how much this meant to you." She wiped at a tear, shaking her head. "He used me," she murmured. "He made me believe he really wanted to meet me, that he cared about our relationship." "Maybe he does care," I offered, almost surprising myself. "Maybe, just not in the way you hoped. His reasons for reconciling with me, they weren't about love. They were about strategy." She looked at me then, really looked at me. Her eyes were shining with grief, confusion, but also something I hadn't seen since this mess began. "Trust, Dad," she said softly. "I'm sorry. You were right to be suspicious. I put you in a horrible situation." The relief that rushed through me was indescribable, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and could finally exhale. But it wasn't just relief. No. As I watched her wipe her cheeks with trembling fingers, I felt an overwhelming wave of sorrow, because no matter what James had done to me, I had never wanted my daughter to feel this disappointed. "It's okay, honey," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "You're young. You see the best in people. That's something I've always admired about you." She looked down for a moment, then sat up straighter. Her voice steadied. "I've made a decision," she said. There was no hesitation in her tone. I tensed slightly. "What kind of decision?" "I don't want them at my wedding," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "Not him, not Patricia, not their children." I blinked. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice soft. "I don't want you to make hasty decisions out of anger." "I'm sure," she said without flinching. "My wedding is to celebrate love, not to serve as a stage for someone to clean up their image." And just like that, I felt a shift, a quiet, powerful resolve in her that reminded me of her mother. Back when we were still young and full of ideals, I didn't press further. I didn't need to. I just nodded and gave her hand another squeeze. That same afternoon, Jessica posted a message on her Instagram account. She didn't name James or go into any messy details, but her words cut clear through the fog of the past few weeks. She wrote about discovering the truth behind a manipulation attempt and her choice to surround herself only with genuine people on her special day. The posts spread fast. Family, close friends, even some distant acquaintances started sharing it. The comments came in like waves, some confused, some fiercely supportive. My mother called, bewildered at first. But once I explained what had happened, she sighed and said, "She's strong just like her father." That meant more than I let on. Even the cousins, the same ones who had told me to be the bigger person who had accused me of holding a grudge too long, started sending me apologetic messages. Some even asked if we could talk sometime. I wasn't ready, but I appreciated the gesture. What surprised me the most was the call from my father. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Something in his voice was different, more serious, maybe even weary. "Something doesn't add up," he said after a long silence. "James has never been a man of sincere regrets." That was all. He didn't say more, and he didn't need to. Hearing him say it was enough. It was a strange kind of closure. Not perfect, but real. The days that followed were unexpectedly peaceful. Jessica and I picked up the pieces and went back to planning the wedding. Only now there was laughter in our conversations. Lightness. I assured her I'd still be covering the expenses just like we'd originally planned. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted from both of us. James tried contacting me one more time. He sent a long message, carefully worded. He said it was all a misunderstanding, that Stephen had misheard, that his Intentions were pure. He said he wanted to start over. I didn't reply. There was no need for more words between us. Whatever there was to say had already been made clear. The morning of Jessica's wedding dawned sunny and warm, as if even the weather had chosen to celebrate our reconciliation. The sky was a soft blue, and the air carried that rare stillness you only feel on days that matter. We waited in the vestibule of the church, just the two of us. She looked radiant in her white dress, elegant and graceful, like something out of a dream. Her hair was swept back with delicate flowers tucked into the curls, and her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her veil. Then she turned to me, her eyes brimming but steady. She took both of my hands. "Thank you for being here, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For not giving up on me, even when I almost gave up on you." Tears threatened to ruin my suit. "You were the best thing I've ever done in my life," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. Nothing and no one could keep me away from this moment. Jessica smiled, blinking back her own tears. Her fingers squeezed mine just as the first notes of the music began to echo through the church. We turned arm in arm and began to walk down the aisle together. It was surreal, the kind of moment you dream about when they're little, playing dress-up or dancing on your feet. I felt a deep swelling pride in my chest, tinged with nostalgia so sharp it hurt. My little girl was no longer a girl. She was a woman, and I was about to give her away to a man who loved her, truly loved her in a way I could see in his eyes every time he looked at her. Life had carried us through some rough waters. There had been betrayals, wounds that ran deep, and moments when I thought we might never find our way back to each other. But here we were. We had made it. As we walked, I glanced at the faces lining the pews. Faces that smiled, teared up, nodded in quiet support. Real family, loyal friends, people who had stood by us through the shadows and the light. The absence of James and Patricia didn't leave a void. If anything, it was like the silence you welcome after noise that never should have been there in the first place. It was confirmation that keeping your distance isn't always a sign of weakness. It's sometimes the clearest, bravest choice. Ceremony was beautiful, intimate, honest. Every vow, every glance, every touch was full of meaning. And the party afterward, God, it was something else. There was laughter, unrestrained and contagious. Tears, of course, hugs that lasted longer than they used to. Dancing music that pulled everyone to their feet. The food was spectacular, and the wine flowed like joy. At one point in the evening, as Jessica spun across the floor with her new husband, her white dress catching the light like it was made of stars, Clara came up to me. She didn't say anything at first, just slipped her hand into mine, her fingers warm and familiar. "What are you thinking about?" she asked eventually, tilting her head. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "That some wounds never fully heal," I said quietly. "But you learn to live with them, and sometimes they take you to better places." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we watched the dance floor in silence, a rare moment of peace. Weeks later, the gossip reached us. Timothy's wedding, James's son, had been a disaster. Not the kind of tabloid chaos, but something more internal, more telling. Family members had chosen not to attend, not because of anything to do with me, but because they had uncovered the same manipulation James had tried with us. His attempt to use the wedding as a tool to mend his image had backfired spectacularly. He had dug his own social grave. I didn't feel joy at the news, nor did I feel sorry for him. What I felt was something quieter, a strange, almost reverent sense of poetic justice, like the universe had taken the reins, handled what I no longer needed to fight. No gloating, no vengeance, just balance. Jessica and I fell into a new rhythm. Sunday coffee, just the two of us, no agenda, no pressure. Sometimes we talked about books or music, sometimes about nothing at all. But it was ours, and it mattered. One Sunday, as the foam on our cappuccinos started to settle and the cafe quieted around us, she looked at me over the rim of her cup. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive them, Dad?" I looked out the window, watching a couple cross the street hand in hand, lost in their own world. "I think," I said slowly, choosing my words. "There's a difference between forgiving and reconciling." She tilted her head, listening. "Maybe I've already forgiven them." I continued in the sense that it doesn't hurt me like it used to. That old sharp ache, it's dulled. I don't carry it the way I used to. I paused, but reconciling, I looked back at her. That requires genuine repentance from both parties, a real willingness to admit harm, to make amends, to rebuild something that broke. I stirred the last of the foam in my cup, watching the swirl fade, and I don't think that is possible. She nodded understandingly, her eyes soft but clear. There was a calmness in her voice that struck something deep in me. "You know," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, "for a long time I thought I had a hole in my life because I didn't know that part of the family. I used to think I was missing something essential, like I'd never be complete unless I filled in that blank space." I looked at her, heart aching a little, unsure of what to say. I had carried that same guilt for years, the kind that doesn't speak often, but sits in your chest like a quiet weight. "But now," she continued, "I realized I was whole. I always have been." My breath caught. I reached for her hand without thinking, and she let me take it. Her fingers were warm, steady. "Sure. You have no idea what that means to me," I said quietly. She smiled. "I think I do." Those words, simple, unpretentious, were the best gift I could have ever received. Better than any apology. Better than any grand gesture. Because in that moment, I knew despite everything I had done wrong, despite all the pain and silence and wounds we had to climb through, I had raised a woman, a strong woman, one who could look pain in the face and still choose honesty, one who could distinguish between real love and the illusion of it, who could stand in her truth no matter how heavy it was. Life goes on. It always does. The wounds we thought would bleed forever eventually become scars. They don't vanish. They don't always heal all the way, but they stop hurting when you brush against them. And some days they remind you of how far you've come. And sometimes, very occasionally, those same betrayals we thought would break us, they lead us home. I've learned that not all wounds are meant to heal completely. And that's okay. Some scars stay to remind us of what we survived. I used to believe forgiveness meant forgetting, that if I really let go of the pain, I'd have to go back to trust like nothing had ever happened. But I don't believe that anymore. True forgiveness, I told Jessica as we watched the late sun cast shadows across the cafe wall, is freeing yourself from the weight of resentment without forcing yourself to keep the people who hurt you in your life. She nodded quietly, repeating the words to herself. "My family's not perfect," I added with a small, sad smile. "Whose is?" "No one's," she said softly. "But it's not about perfection. It's about showing up. And that's what it came down to in the end. The people who showed up, not just physically, but with their hearts, with honesty, with loyalty. My family, my real family, is made up of those who stayed when it was hard, who didn't twist love into obligation or control. Jessica taught me that. Even through the worst of it, she never closed her heart entirely. And when love is real, it finds its way back, even if the path is messy. As for James and Patricia, well, life has its own rhythm, its own way of sorting things out. I never needed to lift a finger. They were architects of their own ruin. Manipulation catches up with everyone eventually. I didn't gloat. I didn't seek revenge. I simply chose not to invite them back in. Sometimes justice doesn't come in grand pronouncements. It shows up quietly like a door you no longer need to open. Dignity, self-respect. Those are the things I hold on to now. Not bitterness, not rage, just the quiet strength of knowing where I stand. Some people don't deserve a place at your table, no matter how much blood they share with you. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.